Hi everyone and welcome to Book Boop. My name is Rachel and today I'm going to be reviewing the Wayward Children series by Seanan McGuire. I'm going to be doing this spoiler free and I'm going to be going through all 5 books that are in the series so far. The series is not finished yet. I know there is a 6th book coming out. I'm not sure if there's going to be more after that, but I believe this is a ongoing series for a while. If you've never heard of the Wayward Children series before, it is a series by Seanan McGuire. They are all novellas, so they are quite short. Most of them are under 200 pages, and the whole idea of them is portal fantasy. So in the very first book, Every Heart a Doorway, we're introduced to this school for wayward children, and it is a school that accepts kids who have returned from magical worlds. So think of Alice from Alice in Wonderland, the Pevensey children that go to Narnia, the kids that go to Neverland, that kind of thing. All these kids that go to these magical places. And then they come back home and they feel honestly really out of place. Either feel like the place that they were in, this magical place, is their real home, and here on Earth is not their real home. A lot of them are having trouble adjusting back into society. Their parents don't understand or believe where they've been. And so they go to this school, and the headmaster of the school is someone who actually went to a magical world as well. So she completely knows and understands and helps these kids get acclimated back into their lives, as well as to give them hope of the possibility that they may be able to go back to those magical world again someday and to stay there. So in the first book, Every Heart a Doorway, that's what we're focusing on. We're focusing on that school. We're introduced to a series of different characters who have gone to all these different types of worlds. Some of them are very sort of fluffy and candy-like and magical, and some of these places are honestly really dark. They're considered like underworld type places where there are skeletons that walk around and roam. Think like Corpse Bride when you go to the underworld in Corpse Bride. So all these different people and kids who have gone to all these different interesting and amazing magical places. But there is danger afoot. In the first book, there ends up being a murder mystery, and it ends up being a lot of fun and spooky, and I had a great time with this book. I do wish it would have been longer. It feels quite short, which that's kind of a normal complaint for a lot of people with this series. I would have liked to see more development for the different characters. I love the idea of multiple kids all sharing the same experience of visiting a magical place. I think that's a really interesting idea. Instead of having just a specific magical place that we're focused on, it's all these different ones and all these different kids that have been to all these different places that have all these different experiences. It's really, really cool. Sometimes the writing felt a little bit abrupt, and I think I let the hype get to me on this one a little bit. There's a lot of hype for this series, especially the very first book, but I do really wanted to read the rest of the series. Definitely, it was just such a fun idea having this portal fantasy, and I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. It is definitely more of a older YA or adult series. I think it's considered adult, but a lot of times this series ends up getting shoved into YA, but it definitely has some more adult themes in there. I will say that. So don't be surprised by that if you're jumping into it, but it was a lot of fun, and I love the idea of this portal fantasy and this world we were introduced to. So I recommend Every Heart a Doorway. It was a lot of fun. So the next one in this series is called, and I apologize, I am getting to my notes here. I've got my little notes so I can track with what I'm wanting to say. The second book of the series is called Down Among the Sticks and Bones. So one of the fun things about this series, so the first book we were introduced to this cast of characters, we were introduced to this school that is considered to be present day. And it kind of flip-flops. So in the very first book, we've got present day, here's what's happening, here's the school, here's the introduction to the idea of different portal worlds and these kids that have gone to these different worlds. The second book, we follow characters that are from the first book. Their names are Jack and Jill. There's these sisters, and they went to the moors. It was the world that they ended up going to and then returning from. And in this book, Down Among the Sticks and Bones, we follow their characters in the past, their journey of falling into the moors, falling into this other world, and what happened to them while they were there, up into when they ended up coming back to our world. So it was a prequel, and it was really cool to see this world that was mentioned in the first book, but got to see it in detail and to see these girls' experiences in the moors. I'm really starting to fall in love with the series. That's what I wrote when I was reading this one. I loved getting to see the full background of Jack and Jill from the first book before they go to the moors and their time in the moors. So we get a lot more insight into their character and how their characters were before they traveled to the moors, and how their characters developed while they were there, how they changed, and they changed drastically. As a parent, it gives me a hard look of what to impress upon our children, certain expectations of interests and habits. So one of the things that Jack and Jill are faced with is that their parents put a lot of weight on them, on what they expect them to be. So it's these twin girls, and they pretty much just, one of them is chosen to be the pretty one. They're the ones that they put the dresses on and the frills, and they expect them to be clean and super polite all the time. And the other girl, they basically push on to be a tomboy. You're into sports. You're into to being dirty and going outside and doing things. And they kind of don't really see what their daughters' personalities are first and what their interests are. They kind of just push it upon them as soon as they were like born. And it just ends up affecting them quite a bit as they grow, and then as they go to the moors and all this kind of stuff. So it definitely gives me a little bit of a look into thinking about, like, do I ever do that with my daughter? You know, do I ever push a certain expectation on her of what I expect her to turn out to be or her interest to be? So it was kind of an interesting thing to think about. It's strange to think such a dark place is considered their home. So the moors is, think about old school Mary Shelley, is that the name? Frankenstein. So think old school Frankenstein, black and white films, like black and white horror films. Think that's the moors. It's got vampires, werewolves, basically Dr. Frankensteins that try to reanimate the dead and are successfully able to do so. It's just a very dark place, but these girls consider this place to be their true home, which is such an odd thing. You'd think that, wouldn't you like the regular world better? I mean, this one seems real dangerous, but that to them is their home. That's where they feel truly like they are themselves. So I ended up giving that one a 4 out of 5 stars. Down Among the Sticks and Bones was really interesting. It's definitely a interesting concept of going to a very dark world, most definitely. So the next one is called Beneath the Sugar Sky. And in this one, it comes back to present day. This occurs after Every Hearted Doorway. So now we're going into the future again. So I like the fact that these books go back and forth. I think it's a lot of fun to do that. And in this one, we get to travel into another world. We are traveling into one of the girls' worlds that is sort of like this Candyland type place. It's an overly sweet place. The oceans are made of soda, and the clouds are cotton candy, and the grass is like licorice. I don't know. It's just like everything's candy and everything's kind of quirky upside down. Think like Wonderland, but with candy everywhere. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know. In my brain it does a little bit, but this one's called Beneath the Sugar Sky. I like that this takes place in the timeline after the first book. I enjoyed returning to familiar characters while also introducing some new. So we got to follow some characters from the first book, but then there were a few new ones as well, which is a lot of fun to see some new people. I got to again see a look into characters' worlds that we've been told about but hadn't experienced. There's lots of nonsensical ideas and dialogue, so definitely think Alice in Wonderland dialogue. Very nonsensical. There's a lot of that in this book because that's what this world is that we get to travel to, which was actually kind of fun. It reminded me of reading Alice in Wonderland. Overall, so far this book seemed to have the most movement. It was definitely go, go, go and fast paced. Now these books are pretty fast paced as they are because they're all novellas, so short. You have to tell the story in a very compact amount of time. But this one to me really pushed along, really trucked along, and I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I gave this one also 4 out of 5 stars. All right, on to the 4th book in this series that is called In an Absent Dream, and again we are jumping into the past, and actually the far past. We are jumping back into one of the professors that is at this boarding school, the Wayward Children boarding school. We're following her experience going to a magical world unlike her own. And so it's really fun to jump into the past again and again get to experience a magical world that we're told about but we didn't get to see. To start with, I hadn't been as interested in the main character that we followed in this book. I wasn't sure why. It's the complete opposite of the previous book with it being high logic. So Beneath the Sugar Sky was very nonsensical, kind of crazy, sugary, weird, just like bizarre. In this one, In an Absent Dream, the place that we go to is considered high logic, which means it's very, very logical, very straightforward, very specific rules that are followed. So it makes a lot more sense, and things are set honestly in a specific formula. So it's kind of opposite. It's not scary like the Moors is and terrifying, and you can easily get murdered there. It's not the Moors, but it's also very high logic. After a bit, the story really sucked me in and I became invested in the characters and story. Overall, it felt like a great addition to the overall Wayward Children story. So I was really surprised how much I actually really liked In an Absent Dream. And it was really fun to see this world that was so highly logical and had very specific rules within this world. It was just a really interesting idea. And I had a lot of fun with it. So I ended up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars as well. And it was a good addition. Okay, so on to the very last one. This one is called Come Tumbling Down, again by Seanan McGuire. And this is the most recent addition to the Wayward Children series. This one came out in January of 2020. So it's a very recent book that came out. And I believe the next one's supposed to come out next year. I can't remember the name of it. I apologize. But in this one, we end up going forward in time again. And we actually visit the Moors again. So it's a very atmospheric book, and I enjoyed revisiting the previous characters. So again, we got to see a lot of characters we're familiar with. I was glad this one was set in the future timeline. It's always fun I like going in the past, but it's fun to kind of feel like I'm moving the story forward, and we're moving from Wayward Children, from Every Heart a Doorway on and moving into the future. It's another in-depth look of the Moors, which honestly, it's not my favorite setting. The Moors is not the kind of world I personally would want to travel to. Now, I love reading dark and creepy books. I love it. But I don't really like to watch scary movies, and I absolutely am terrified of haunted houses. I don't like going through haunted houses on Halloween. I'm not the kind of person that likes to physically feel like I'm there. If I'm reading a book, it feels safer, and it still gives me chills, but I enjoy it. I don't really like watching or seeing it, or I wouldn't want to go to the Moors. Let's put it that way. The Moors is a terrifying place. I wouldn't want to go. But this one focuses on the Moors quite a bit. I'm not a huge fan. We're following Jack and Jill again, who are the kids that went to the Moors. I'm not a huge fan of Jill's character. We follow Jill a lot in this story. She's a very dry and blunt person, which just rubs me the wrong way. That's just her character, though. I don't mind her when she is a side character, but not a huge fan when she's the main focus. So Jack is a very scientifically minded person, and she's very cut and dry, and she's extremely blunt. She's the kind of person like, I will tell you the truth straight up, even if it sounds super rude, because it is in my code to just say what I think and to say what is truth, because I like to follow rules, and I know that if you do this, this, and this, then this occurs. And so that's just her personality, and it can be a little bit grating, to be perfectly honest. So I'm not a huge fan of Jack's character, or Jill's character, as well. I'm looking forward to the next installment in the series. I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. So overall, I do highly recommend the Wayward Children series. It is a fantastic series to binge. If you are in the mood to jump into a series but not have high commitment, something that you could easily read quickly, I highly recommend this series. It was a lot of fun. I love Portal Fantasy. It reminded me a lot of the fairy tales and stories that I grew up with, that I loved so much, like Alice in Wonderland, like Chronicles of Narnia, like Peter Pan, and all these different type portal fantasies. It just made me feel like a kid again, but they were written in a more adult setting, which is so fascinating, because when I think of Portal Fantasy, I think of things for kids. So it's such an interesting concept, and I think Seanan McGuire has done a really interesting job. I would really love to have seen these written as actual full-length novels instead of novellas. It's an interesting idea to do it in novella form, but I could have easily had fun reading these if they were longer novels, to be honest, because I really enjoyed them a lot. So I highly recommend them. If you have read any of the series, let me know what you think about it down below, or let me know if this is something that has interested you, or maybe if it hasn't, if it doesn't interest you, or if you didn't like it, let me know why down below. I'd really love to have a conversation about that. On this side of the video over here is my logo. If you click on that, you can subscribe to my channel and follow me on my book journey. On this side of the video over here is a suggestion for another video if you don't watch another one right now. But thank you so much for watching. You rock, and don't forget to keep reading. Bye.